If you walk into the lobby of almost any major financial institution or conservative think tank, you will likely find a bust, a portrait, or at least a reverent reference to one man, Adam Smith. He is the patron saint of modern capitalism. We are told that he is the man who gave us the invisible hand, the divine intellectual permission slip that says greed is good, regulation is bad, and if we all just act selfishly, society will magically perfect itself. It is a comforting story. It absolves corporations of responsibility and tells politicians to sit down and shut up. But there is a massive, uncomfortable problem with this story. It is a lie. The version of Adam Smith we worship today is a fictional character. If the real Adam Smith were alive today and saw the global economy dominated by massive conglomerates, political lobbying, and wealth concentration, he wouldn't applaud. He would be leading the protest. To understand why, we have to do something few economists ever actually do. We have to read what the man actually wrote. And when we do, we discover that the invisible hand isn't what you think it is. In fact, it might be the greatest marketing scam in human history. To understand the text, you must understand the context. We often imagine Smith writing in a world of bustling free markets that just needed to be unleashed. That is false. Adam Smith was born in Scotland in 1723. And the world he looked out at wasn't a free market, it was a rigged game. Britain was a mercantilist empire. This was an era where the crown picked winners and losers. You couldn't just start a business, you needed a royal charter. Prices were fixed by guilds, wages were suppressed by laws. But the biggest villain in Smith's life, the antagonist of his story, was the British East India Company. This wasn't just a company. It was a sovereign power with its own private army, its own navy, and the ability to declare war. It controlled trade through brute force and government corruption. When Smith looked at the economy of his day, he didn't see a beautiful self-regulating machine. He saw a conspiracy. He saw merchants using their wealth to buy laws that crushed their competition. So, when Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations, he wasn't writing a manifesto to let corporations run wild. He was writing a hit piece against monopolies. He was warning us that when business owners gather together, the conversation almost always ends in a conspiracy against the public to raise prices. That is the real Smith, a man deeply suspicious of concentrated power. Here is the second piece of the puzzle that gets conveniently lost in the history books. Adam Smith was not an economist. The profession didn't even exist yet. He was a moral philosopher. Before he ever penned a word about supply and demand, he wrote a massive treatise called The Theory of Moral Sentiments. Smith considered this his most important work. In it, he argued that human society is held together not by math or money, but by sympathy, the ability to feel what others are feeling. He believed that a market without a moral foundation wasn't a market, it was a jungle. He argued that the obsession with wealth makes us miserable, and that true happiness comes from being loved, and being lovely, meaning worthy of respect. Does that sound like the greed is good guy? This context is vital because it proves that Smith never believed self-interest alone was enough to run a civilization. He believed self-interest had to be caged within a framework of justice. Now, let's tackle the elephant in the room, the invisible hand. If you take an economics 101 class, you are taught that the invisible hand is the central pillar of Smith's thought. It is the universal law that says markets fix themselves. But if you search Smith's entire lifetime of work, thousands of pages, millions of words, do you know how many times he used the phrase, invisible hand? 3 times. Just 3. And here is the kicker. Not a single one of those 3 mentions describes the free market regulating itself. Let's look at them, one by one, and watch the myth crumble. The first hand. The hand of Zeus. The first time Smith uses the phrase, it's in a forgotten essay on the history of astronomy. He isn't talking about money at all. He is talking about savages who fear thunder and lightning. He writes that when early humans couldn't explain natural disasters, they attributed them to the visible hand of Jupiter. In this context, the invisible hand isn't a brilliant economic force, it's a superstition. It is a delusion we create to explain things we don't understand. It's almost ironic that we now use the term to explain the economy in the exact same superstitious way. The second hand, the hand of gluttony. The second use is in the theory of moral sentiments. Smith is describing rich, feudal landlords, men vain and insatiable. These landlords own all the land and grow thousands of crops. But Smith notes a physical limitation. A rich man has the same size stomach as a poor man. He cannot eat 10,000 potatoes. So, what happens? He is forced to distribute the leftovers to his servants and workers, just to keep them alive so they can work the fields. Smith says they are led by an invisible hand to distribute life's necessities. Is this a celebration of capitalism? No. It's a cynical observation that even the most selfish gluttons eventually have to spill some crumbs for the peasants, or else the peasants will die and the landlord will have no one to work for him. It's not benevolence, it's biology. The third hand, the hand of fear. This brings us to the most famous one, the only mention in the Wealth of Nations. And this is where the misinterpretation is most tragic. Smith is discussing a specific type of merchant, one who is afraid to send his money abroad. This merchant doesn't trust foreign courts or foreign captains. He is anxious. Because of this insecurity, he chooses to invest his money at home in Britain. Smith writes that by preferring the support of domestic industry, he is led by an invisible hand to promote an end which was no part of his intention: national security. Please catch the nuance here. The merchant isn't being guided by a magical market force of efficiency. He is being guided by his own risk aversion. His fear of losing money abroad accidentally helps the local economy. That's it. Those are the three hands: superstition, gluttony, and fear. Nowhere does Smith say, deregulation creates prosperity. Nowhere does he say, leave the banks alone. He is simply observing that sometimes human imperfections can have unintended positive side effects. So, how did we get here? How did a sarcastic metaphor about unintended consequences become a religious doctrine for the global economy? The answer lies in the 20th century. As the Cold War heated up, the West needed an ideological weapon to fight communism. Karl Marx had Das Kapital, so the West needed a counter-prophet. They dusted off Adam Smith. Economists like those in the Chicago School, along with political strategists in the Reagan and Thatcher eras, began a systematic rebranding of Smith. They stripped away the moral philosophy. They deleted the attacks on monopolies. They ignored his calls for public education and high wages. They took that one phrase, the invisible hand, and inflated it into a theology. They turned Smith from a complex moral philosopher into a cardboard cutout that simply says, cut taxes. It was an intellectual heist. They stole the credibility of a great thinker to justify the very things he hated: corporate consolidation and the erosion of public power. Why does this history lesson matter right now? Because we are living in the ruins of this misunderstanding. By believing in the myth of the invisible hand, we convinced ourselves that we didn't need to watch the store. We assumed the market would police itself. We allowed tech giants to buy up all their competitors because the market knows best. We allowed financial systems to take insane risks because the market creates efficiency. But Smith warned us. He warned us that if you let merchants write the laws, they will rig the game. He warned us that without a moral framework, capitalism becomes predatory. If you look at the modern economy, where a handful of companies control everything from the food we eat to the information we consume, you are looking at a world that Adam Smith would have called a failure. We have mistaken the freedom of corporations for the freedom of people. We don't need to abandon Adam Smith. We need to rescue him. We need to read the rest of the book. The real Adam Smith believed in markets, yes, but he believed in markets that serve society, not a society that served markets. He believed that the true measure of a nation's wealth wasn't the size of its gold reserves or its stock market, but the quality of life of its poorest citizens. The invisible hand isn't coming to save us. It never was. The market is not a god, it is a tool. And like any tool, if you don't handle it with care and guide it with a steady hand, it will cut you. The outcome of our economy isn't determined by invisible forces. It's determined by the choices we make, the rules we enforce, and the values we choose to uphold. It's time we stopped waiting for the magic and started doing the work.